I still remember the way the night felt when this began, cold in a quiet way, the kind that makes old memories surface. Some stories don't announce themselves. They just start walking beside you, whether you're ready or not. The Vampire King rode alone through the forest, his black horse breathing clouds into the moonlight. The kingdom slept behind him, stone towers and iron gates fading into darkness, but he did not look back. He hadn't slept in days, not since the whisper reached his ears. A girl had been seen beyond the eastern hills, a girl with his eyes. The reins trembled slightly in his hands, not from fear but from something far older and harder to name. Hope, perhaps, or regret. He had ruled for centuries with a steady hand and a quiet heart. To his people he was distant but fair, a king who punished cruelty and rewarded loyalty without spectacle. Few knew how carefully he listened. Fewer still knew how deeply he carried loss. Long ago, a child had been taken from him in the chaos of war and betrayal, a daughter born under a blood-red moon, gone before she could speak his name. They told him she was dead. He had believed them because believing was easier than searching forever. Now every hoofbeat against the frozen earth felt like an accusation. The forest thickened as he rode, ancient trees bending inward as if they recognized him. Owls watched in silence. Wolves kept their distance. The Vampire King lowered his hood, letting the moon touch his face. There was no monster in his expression, only a tired father chasing a fragile truth. By dawn, he reached the edge of the Forgotten Lands. The air changed there, lighter, thinner, carrying the scent of smoke and wild herbs. A small village lay ahead, poor but alive. Children's laughter echoed faintly, and the sound struck him harder than any blade. He slowed his horse, listening, his heart pulling him forward despite the risk of being seen. He dismounted at the edge of the trees. Kings did not belong in places like this. Neither did legends, but he walked anyway. Villagers froze when they noticed him. Some bowed out of instinct, others stepped back in fear. He raised his empty hands, a simple gesture practiced over many years. "I seek no tribute," he said calmly, "only the truth." An old woman studied his face longer than the others. Her eyes were sharp, unafraid. "You're looking for the girl," she said. The words tightened his chest, and yes. "She lives near the river," the woman continued. "Or she did, we don't see her much anymore." The Vampire King felt something fracture inside him, slow and silent. "Why?" The old woman hesitated. "Because she runs when people look at her too closely." He thanked them with a nod and turned toward the river path. Each step felt heavier, memories pressing in. He remembered holding a tiny hand once, warm and impossibly small. He remembered promising protection he had failed to give. The river shimmered ahead, wide and restless, and there she was. The girl stood barefoot on the bank, her dark hair tangled by the wind. She couldn't have been more than 15. She stared into the water as if searching for someone beneath the surface. When she turned slightly, the Vampire King's breath caught. His eyes, not similar, not close, the same. He stepped forward without thinking, a branch snapping underfoot. The sound startled her. She turned fully now, fear flashing across her face. She saw his cloak, his pale skin, his eyes reflecting the light in a way that was not entirely human. She ran. "Wait," he called, the word breaking from him before he could soften it. She didn't slow, her feet pounded the damp earth as she fled along the river bank. The Vampire King hesitated only a second before whistling sharply. His horse answered from the trees. In moments, he was mounted again, riding parallel to her path, careful not to overtake her too quickly. "I won't hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low, steady. "I swear it." She glanced back, panic and anger mixing in her expression. "Everyone says that," she shouted, "until they see what I am." "What you are," the words pierced him. He guided his horse ahead of her, slowing deliberately, then dismounted and stood in her path unarmed. She skidded to a stop, chest heaving, eyes wild. Up close, he saw more than her resemblance to him. He saw exhaustion, loneliness, the quiet strength of someone who had learned to survive without protection. "I know who you are," he said gently. She laughed, sharp and hollow. No, you don't. I know what you feel, he replied. Like you don't belong anywhere, like something inside you scares people before they even know your name. Her laughter faded. Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. The river rushed behind her. The forest waited behind him. Who are you? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The vampire king opened his mouth to answer, to say the words he had buried for years, to claim her. But before he could speak, she flinched, clutching her head as pain crossed her face. Her eyes flashed crimson for a heartbeat, uncontrolled, raw. She staggered back toward the river's edge. Fear returned, stronger now. Stay away, she cried. You don't know what happens when I lose control. The vampire king took a step closer anyway, ignoring the danger, ignoring the warnings etched into his own past. I know, he said softly, because it happens to me too. She froze, staring at him, the truth trembling in the space between them. And in that suspended moment, with the river roaring and the sun climbing higher, the vampire king realized something that made his heart sink even as it burned with hope. Finding his daughter was only the beginning. Saving her might cost him everything. The silence between them felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. The girl stood rigid at the river's edge, her breath uneven, her eyes locked on his face as if one wrong word might shatter everything. The vampire king slowly lowered himself to one knee, not in submission but in humility. He made himself smaller on purpose. Kings rarely did that. Fathers sometimes had to. I won't come closer, he said quietly, not unless you ask me to. Her fingers trembled at her sides. The crimson glow in her eyes faded, leaving behind something softer, something scared. You should go, she whispered. People who stay near me, they get hurt. I don't mean to, it just happens. I know, he said again, and this time the word carried weight. When power wakes before understanding, it feels like a curse. She studied him now, really looking. The calm in his voice confused her. Most adults shouted. Some begged, others ran. None had ever spoken to her like this, as if her pain was familiar. My name is Alara, she said cautiously, as if offering it might be used against her. The sound of her name struck him deeper than any blade ever had. He repeated it softly, tasting it like a memory he should have had but didn't. It's a beautiful name. Her jaw tightened. Don't talk to me like that. Like what? Like I matter. The words landed heavy in the air. He stood slowly, careful not to startle her. You matter, he said simply, whether you believe it yet or not. They walked along the river then, not side by side, but not far apart either. The water reflected broken pieces of sky, and the forest seemed to listen. Alara kept her eyes on the ground, her voice low. They found me when I was little, she said. A family near the hills. They tried to be kind. But when things started happening, animals scared, windows cracking, people getting sick, when I cried, they sent me away. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He forced them open. I've been moving ever since, she continued. If I stay too long, someone gets hurt, so I leave before that happens. And no one ever helped you, he asked. She shrugged. Most people don't help what they don't understand. He stopped walking. That's where they failed you. She turned, suspicion flaring again. You talk like you know everything about me. No, he said gently. I talk like someone who has spent centuries punishing himself for not protecting what mattered most. The river wind lifted her hair, revealing a faint mark at the base of her neck. His breath caught, a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon, the same mark carried by the royal bloodline, the same mark he had kissed the night his daughter was born. Alara noticed his stare and instinctively covered it. Don't look at me like that. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I don't mean to frighten you. You already did, she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. From the trees behind them came the sound of hurried footsteps. Too many, too careless. The vampire king turned sharply, senses flaring. Men emerged from the forest, armed with crude weapons and fear-filled eyes. Hunters, not of animals but of rumors. He stepped in front of Alara without thinking, his body a shield. "There she is," one man shouted, "the cursed girl." Alara's breathing quickened. The air around them seemed to vibrate, responding to her rising panic. Leaves shook. The river churned. "Don't," she begged, clutching her head. "Please don't make me lose control." The Vampire King raised his hands toward the men, his voice calm but carrying a quiet authority that froze the air. "Leave," he said. "Now." They laughed. "Move aside, stranger. This doesn't concern you." "I didn't move." Instead, he felt Alara's power surge behind him, wild and untrained, pressing against the edges of something dangerous. He realized then that this moment would define everything. If she unleashed what was inside her, the world would confirm its worst fears about her, and she would never forgive herself. He turned slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Look at me," he said. She did, tears spilling freely now. "Breathe with me," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." The hunters raised their weapons, and as the first crack of power rippled through the ground beneath their feet, the Vampire King knew he had only seconds to choose between revealing what he truly was or losing her forever. The ground shuddered once, then went still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The hunters froze, their confidence draining as the air grew heavy and sharp. The Vampire King stepped forward. Not fast, not in anger, just enough to place himself fully between Alara and the men who feared her. You should listen to your instincts," he said calmly. "They're telling you this moment won't end the way you think." One of the hunters scoffed, though his grip on his weapon tightened. "You're just a man." The Vampire King lifted his gaze, and for the first time he stopped hiding. His eyes darkened, deepening into something ancient and commanding, not monstrous, controlled, powerful. "I am a father," he replied, "and I am done asking." The forest responded. The wind stilled, the birds fell silent, even the river seemed to slow. The men staggered back, suddenly aware that they stood before something far beyond village rumors. Alara gasped softly behind him. She felt it too, not fear, recognition. The chaos inside her eased as if something familiar had taken hold of it. The hunters fled. They didn't scream, they didn't fight. They simply dropped their weapons and ran, terror driving their feet faster than reason ever could. Within seconds, the forest swallowed them whole. When the danger passed, the Vampire King exhaled slowly, allowing the power to settle back into silence. The world returned to normal, but nothing truly felt the same. Alara stared at him, eyes wide. "What are you?" He turned to face her fully. There was no hiding now. "Someone like you," he said. "Someone who learned control the hard way." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "You could have killed them." Yes," he answered honestly. "But fear doesn't teach mercy, it only breeds more fear." She searched his face, looking for deception, for cruelty, for the hunger she'd been warned about all her life. She found none, only restraint, only care. "Oh, you stepped in front of me," she said quietly. "You didn't even hesitate." "Because that's what should have happened a long time ago," he replied. They sat by the river after that, the tension slowly unwinding. Alara hugged her knees to her chest, watching the water glide past. The Vampire King kept a respectful distance, though every instinct in him wanted to reach out. "My power scares me," she admitted. "I don't know where it ends." "It ends where you decide it does," he said. "Power listens to intention more than anger." She frowned. "That sounds easy." "It isn't," he said gently, "but it's possible." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling her thoughts since the forest went quiet. "Is that why you were looking for me?" His throat tightened. The truth pressed against his chest, heavy and fragile. "Oh, yes." She waited. "I lost someone once," he continued. A child, I believed she was gone, and I spent centuries ruling a kingdom while pretending the ache would fade. Alara's hands clenched in her sleeves. What happened to her? He met her eyes. I failed to protect her. The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than any display of power could have. Adults usually blamed fate, or enemies, or her. You don't sound like a king, she said softly. He smiled faintly. That's because crowns don't teach you how to love, loss does. A long silence passed. The sun dipped lower, casting gold across the river. Alara reached up without thinking, brushing her fingers over the crescent mark at her neck. Oh, you keep looking at this, she said. Why? The Vampire King stood slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might break the moment. He took a single step closer, then stopped, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Because, he said, voice barely steady, only one bloodline bears that mark. Her breath caught. No, she whispered, that's not possible. I thought so too, he said, until today. The truth settled between them, fragile and terrifying. Alara stood abruptly, backing away. You're lying. I wish I were, he replied. Her power stirred again, not in anger this time, but in fear. The air hummed softly, reacting to her turmoil. If you're telling the truth, she said, voice shaking, then everything I am, everything I've been running from. It is not a curse, he said firmly. It's a heritage. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't just believe that. I'm not asking you to, he said, not yet. She turned from him, staring at the darkening forest beyond the river. If you're my father, she said slowly, then why did you wait so long? The question struck deeper than any blade ever could. And as night began to fall, the Vampire King realized the hardest battle ahead wasn't against fear or enemies. It was earning the trust of the daughter he had already lost once the question stayed between them long after the words were spoken. Why did you wait so long? It wasn't anger in her voice that hurt him most. It was the quiet disbelief. The Vampire King didn't answer right away. He looked toward the river, watching the current carry leaves downstream, never stopping, never turning back. Because I was told you were gone, he said at last. And because I was afraid that if I searched and found nothing, I wouldn't survive that truth a second time. Alara swallowed. So you chose a kingdom over a child. I chose what I thought would keep the world standing, he replied. And every night since, I wondered if the world was worth it. She turned to him then, her eyes wet but steady. I didn't have a kingdom, she said. I had nowhere. The words hit him harder than accusation ever could. They made camp as darkness settled in, no fire at first. Alara flinched at sudden light and he noticed, adjusting without comment. He gathered dry wood quietly, moving with care, as if learning her rhythms instead of forcing his own. When the fire finally burned low and gentle, she sat across from him, knees drawn close, shadows flickering over her face. If you're telling the truth, she said, then people will never stop hunting me. Not just villagers, not just men with fear in their hands. I know, he answered. That's why you can't stay here. Her body tensed. You want to send me away again? No, he said firmly. I want to bring you home. The word hung in the air, dangerous and delicate. I don't know what home means, she whispered. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the ground, open and empty. It means safety. It means teachers who won't abandon you when you lose control. It means walls built to protect, not imprison. And you, she asked, what do you mean? He met her gaze without flinching. It means I don't rule from a throne anymore without knowing my daughter is safe. Her power stirred softly, reacting to the honesty rather than resisting it. From beyond the firelight came a sound, hooves. The Vampire King rose instantly, senses sharpening. He recognized the presence before he saw them. Riders in dark armor emerged from the trees, bearing the crest of his own kingdom. His guards, Relief flickered through him, quickly followed by dread. They dismounted swiftly, kneeling. "My king," their captain said, "we tracked you from the eastern road. The council is in unrest. They fear you've exposed yourself." Alara stepped back, fear flashing again. "You brought them," she said. "You told them about me." "No," he said quietly, "but they would have followed me anywhere." The captain's eyes fell on Alara, sharp and assessing. He stiffened. "Is this the girl?" The vampire king placed himself between them once more. "She is under my protection." "Your Majesty," the captain replied carefully, "the council will not accept this easily. A wild-blooded heir." "Enough," the king said, his voice calm but absolute. "You will speak of her with respect or not at all." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Alara felt the tension spike, her control wavering under the weight of so many watching eyes. "I can't go with you," she said suddenly. "Not like this, they'll fear me, they'll lock me away." The vampire king turned to her. "No one will cage you," he said. "You can't promise that," she replied. "Even kings can break promises." The captain stepped forward. "We should leave before dawn," he urged. "The council grows impatient." Ilara backed toward the darkness, heart pounding. "I won't be a problem for you," she said quickly. "I'll disappear, I always do." The vampire king felt panic rise, sharp and immediate. He reached out, stopping himself inches from her arm. "Running kept you alive," he said softly, "but it doesn't have to define you anymore." She shook her head, tears slipping free. "I don't know how to trust a place I've never been allowed to exist in." He took a breath, then did something no one in his kingdom had ever seen. He turned to his guards and removed his crown, setting it gently on the ground. "If she leaves," he said, "I leave with her. No throne, no council, no kingdom." The forest went utterly still. Alara stared at him, stunned. The guards froze, torn between duty and disbelief. The vampire king met his daughter's eyes, unguarded and resolute. "This is not a command," he said. "It's a choice, and it's yours." The fire crackled softly between them as Alara stood trembling, torn between fear and hope, knowing that whatever she chose next would change both their lives forever. The crown lay on the ground like a question no one dared to answer. Firelight glinted off its dark metal, but it felt strangely small now, powerless beside the weight of the moment. Alara stared at it, then at him. "You would really leave everything?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "I already did," the vampire king said quietly, "the moment I found you." The guards shifted uneasily. The captain cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the kingdom." "Will survive," the king interrupted. "It always has, but she may not if I fail her again." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. The guards lowered their eyes. None of them had ever heard him speak like this, not as a ruler, as a father. Alara's chest tightened. She had spent her life believing she was a burden, a danger people tolerated until fear outweighed pity. Now a king stood before her, offering everything without demanding obedience in return. "I don't know how to be a daughter," she said. A faint smile touched his face. "Then we'll learn together." Her power stirred, not in panic this time, but in response to something warm and unfamiliar. Belonging. It frightened her more than isolation ever had. The captain finally spoke again, softer now. "If she is truly your blood, then the law demands she be tested." Alara flinched. "Tested how?" The vampire king turned slowly, his gaze hardening just enough to draw a clear line. "You will not turn her pain into spectacle." "The council will insist," the captain replied. "They fear what they don't control." The king nodded once. "Then they will see control born from care, not chains." He faced Alara again. "There is a sanctuary beyond the Black Cliffs," he said. "A place where young ones like you are taught to breathe through the storm instead of fighting it. No crowds, no judgment." Well, she hesitated. "And if I fail?" "Then I will be there," he said. "Not watching, standing beside you." The guards prepared to leave, some reluctantly, some relieved. As they mounted their horses, Alara watched them go, tension slowly releasing from her shoulders. Night deepened around the camp, the fire burned low, the forest no longer felt like an enemy. Alara sat near the river again, knees drawn close. The vampire king joined her, this time closer than before, close enough that she didn't pull away. I used to think my power meant I was broken, she said. That something went wrong when I was born. He shook his head. Nothing went wrong, something rare happened. She looked at him, searching his face for lies. Finding none, she let herself lean slightly toward him, just enough to feel his presence. Solid, real. I'm afraid, she admitted. So am I, he replied. But fear doesn't mean stop, it means move carefully. From the distance came a low rumble, not thunder, too steady, too deliberate. The vampire king rose slowly, eyes narrowing. He felt it now, a pressure in the air, ancient, familiar. What is it? Alara asked. Someone who doesn't fear the council, he said, and doesn't respect my choice. A shadow passed over the moon as a figure emerged at the forest's edge, tall and unmoving, power coiled tightly beneath stillness. Alara's instincts screamed danger. The vampire king stepped in front of her once more, his voice calm but edged with steel. Stay behind me, he said. The figure smiled faintly. I wondered how long it would take you to find her. The king's jaw tightened. You should have stayed buried in the past. The stranger's eyes flicked to Alara, sharp with interest. The girl is more than you realize. The night seemed to close in around them. And in that moment, the vampire king understood the truth with chilling clarity. The greatest threat to his daughter wasn't fear or ignorance. It was someone who wanted her power for themselves. The figure stepped closer, moonlight revealing a familiar face the vampire king had hoped never to see again. Not an enemy from outside the kingdom, but one born within it, an elder of the old blood, a man who believed power existed to be owned. You should not have followed me, the vampire king said quietly. The elder smiled, slow and knowing. You always were sentimental, even as a child. Alara felt the air tighten, her power reacting to the tension, restless but contained. He knows me, she whispered. Oh yes, the king said, and that is why he must leave. The elder's gaze never left Alara. You've raised her in fear, he said calmly. All these years hiding what she could become, give her to me, I can teach her mastery, the kind that commands respect. Alara's hands shook. Old instincts urged her to run, to disappear before someone else decided her fate. She looked at the vampire king, waiting for him to decide for her. Oh, he didn't. Instead, he stepped aside. Oh, the gesture stunned them both. She is not mine to give, he said, and she is not yours to claim. The elder's smile faded. Then you will lose her. No, the king replied, I will trust her. Alara's breath caught. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't standing in front of her to shield her or restrain her. He was standing beside her. The elder extended a hand toward her. Come, he said, end the fear, end the running. Alara felt the familiar pull of power, tempting and dangerous. She closed her eyes and remembered the river, the fire, the way the vampire king had listened without trying to control her. She opened her eyes and took a slow breath. I don't want power that feeds on fear, she said steadily. I want control that protects. The elder's expression hardened. You're choosing weakness. No, she replied, I'm choosing myself. The air shifted as her power rose, not in a violent surge, but in a steady, luminous presence. The forest didn't recoil, it leaned in. The river calmed. Even the night seemed to soften. The elder staggered back, unprepared for what he was witnessing. That's not possible, he muttered. The vampire king watched, heart aching with pride. This was what had been stolen from her all those years ago. Guidance, choice. Leave, Alara said, her voice quiet but unshakable. The elder hesitated, then turned away, retreating into the shadows without another word. His hunger had found no place to attach itself. When the forest fell silent again, Alara swayed. The vampire king caught her before she fell, steadying her gently. She didn't pull away this time. I did it, she whispered. Oh, yes, he said softly, you did. Dawn crept over the horizon, pale and forgiving. The night that had chased them for so long finally loosened its grip. They began the journey together as the sun rose, not as king and subject, not as legend and curse, but as a father and daughter learning how to walk beside each other. The crown remained behind, untouched. Weeks later, at the sanctuary beyond the Black Cliffs, Alara learned to shape her power with patience instead of fear. The vampire king stayed, not on a throne, but in the quiet moments that mattered, listening, teaching, protecting when asked, stepping back when needed. The kingdom did not fall. It changed. Stories spread, not of a ruthless ruler, but of a king who chose love over control, and a daughter who proved that strength guided by kindness could reshape even ancient blood. And in time, when Alara was ready, she returned to the world not as something to be feared, but as something to be trusted. Because the truth, the vampire king discovered that night was simple and enduring. A power alone does not change everything. Love does.